Mom said, "Stay away from Christmas, you useless failure." That text hit while I was parked right outside their house, snow piling on the windshield trunk, full of gifts I'd wrapped myself. No call, no explanation, just a sentence that ended 20 years of obedience. So I didn't go in. I shifted into reverse, watched their porch fade in the mirror, and drove until the state line disappeared behind me. The next morning, their heating shut off. By nightfall, the internet was gone. At 9:47 p.m., she finally texted, "Please fix this." I just smiled because she had no idea what was coming next. Before I tell you everything, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who made you feel small? Your stories remind me I wasn't the only one. My name is Molly Carter. I'm 33, a software consultant living in Austin, Texas. And until last Christmas, I thought being the dependable one was something to be proud of. I built my whole identity around fixing other people's messes. My family made sure of that. Every birthday, every holiday, every emergency, they called me first. Rent late, Molly will help. Phone broken, Molly will pay. I didn't complain. I told myself it was love even when it felt like obligation dressed as duty. My parents still live in Missouri in the same 2-bedroom house where my sister and I grew up. The walls smell like old pine cleaner and burnt coffee. Mom Margaret is the kind of woman who always needs an audience. Her words could slice through silk sweet to strangers sharp at home. Dad Robert used to work construction until his back gave out. After that, he spent more time complaining about pain than trying to get better. But it wasn't his body that made him cruel, it was his pride. Losing control turned him mean, and Mom learned to speak through his silence using guilt like a second language. Then there's Kayla, my little sister. She's 28, studying to be a physical therapist. Bright, funny, easy to love. The golden child, but not a bad person. If anything, she tried to survive by staying invisible. She'd tell me, "It's easier if you just let Mom win." And I did for years, because I thought peace was worth the price of swallowing my pride. I moved to Austin 6 years ago after landing a big client. I thought distance would soften things. It didn't. The phone calls kept coming, the same pattern, a few weeks of silence, then a sudden, "Hey, could you just help us with," followed by another bill I didn't remember agreeing to pay. Gas, electric, internet, even their car insurance. I was their safety net, and they never noticed I was unraveling. Still, I kept trying. Every Christmas, I drove 14 hours north with gifts stacked in the trunk and hope packed in the glove compartment. I told myself this year will be different. It never was. There was always a comment waiting for me the second I walked in. "You look tired from Mom. Must be all that computer work from Dad." And then Kayla whispering, "Don't let it get to you." But it did, every time. Last December felt different, though. Kayla hadn't been home in a while, and we'd planned to surprise our parents together. I'd already bought everything: winter clothes for Dad, a gold necklace for Mom, peppermint cake mix for Kayla. My car smelled like cinnamon and wrapping paper. I even wore the ridiculous green sweater Kayla dared me to wear, the one with embroidered Christmas lights on the sleeves. I wanted to believe it meant something, that maybe this was the year Mom would just hug me without finding something to fix. That text, "Stay away from Christmas." "You useless failure," came while I was sitting right there, engine still running. No context, no reason, just that. I stared at it thinking maybe she meant it for someone else, but I knew better. It was precise. Surgical. She'd chosen every word to wound, and she succeeded. I didn't text back. I didn't knock. I just backed out of the driveway and drove until the highway swallowed the snow behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt still, like something heavy had finally stopped moving inside me. That's how I ended up at a cheap motel just past the state line, fluorescent lights buzzing, heater, wheezing a gas station sandwich sitting untouched on the nightstand. I sat there in that tiny room with my phone face down, the silence ringing in my ears, realizing I'd spent my entire adult life being useful instead of being loved. And somewhere between the hum of the heater and the flicker of the Christmas lights outside, I decided that being done wasn't weakness. It was freedom. The next morning, the sun crept through the blinds like it had no idea the world had shifted overnight. I woke up still in that green sweater, the one with the stitched bulbs that used to make me laugh. It felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of every "just help us" this once I'd ever agreed to. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. No apology, no explanation. Just the ghost of that message burned into the screen of my mind. I made coffee in the motel lobby, the kind that tastes like cardboard and survival, and opened my laptop. Habit, I guess. For years, that was how I started every morning. Log and check the client dashboard, then check my parents' bills. Their names were everywhere on auto-pay lists, linked accounts, scheduled transfers. It hit me that half my digital life belonged to people who had just told me I was a failure. That realization was quiet but brutal, like a mirror you didn't mean to look into. I stared at the heating account first. The balance blinked red, due tomorrow. Then the internet, the car insurance, the phone plan all set to pull from my checking account. I could have ignored it. I could have let it slide one more month like I always did, but something in me had cracked clean through the night before, and cracks, once they start, don't stop. They widen until everything that held you together starts to fall apart, and sometimes that's the only way to see what's underneath. So I called the bank. My voice was calm, almost polite. I need to remove myself from some linked accounts. The woman on the other end asked if I wanted to schedule it or do it immediately. Immediately, I said. She asked if I was sure. I said completely. When it was done, I sat back, listening to the faint hum of the heater. I expected guilt. I expected panic. Instead, there was silence. Real silence. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that breathes. For years, I'd mistaken being needed for being loved. Every transfer, every bill I paid was another piece of myself I mailed back to a house that never wanted me in it. That text from Mom wasn't new, it was just honest. She'd finally said what she always meant: I was only valuable when I was useful. And now I wasn't. I opened my inbox. Emails stacked like unpaid debts receipts, reminders, renewal notices. I started canceling one after another. Heating, internet, car insurance, phone plan. One by one, I watched them disappear from my dashboard until all that was left were my own accounts, my name, my life, my clean slate. By the time I finished, my coffee had gone cold. I looked out the window. Snow was melting on the motel parking lot, turning to thin rivers under the winter sun. I hadn't realized how small I'd been living, measured in deposits, in favors, and how quietly I could exist without upsetting anyone. That morning, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. My phone buzzed once, a text from Kayla. Just a photo of their living room, dark and undecorated. She canceled Christmas, she wrote, said it's your fault. I stared at the screen, not even angry, just sad. My sister didn't deserve that, but I couldn't fix it this time. I typed back, I know, just hang in there, then deleted it before sending. Old habits die hard. Later that day, I took a drive through town. The streets were lined with families hauling trees on their roofs, kids laughing, music spilling from every open cafe door. I wondered if they knew how lucky they were to have homes that didn't weaponize love, to have mothers who didn't turn kindness into currency. For the first time, I envied strangers more than I missed my own family. That night, I sat by the motel window, again laptop open, cursor blinking on a blank document. I didn't know what to write: an email to Mom, a letter to myself, a resignation notice from the family I'd been serving since birth. Instead, I typed 2 words and left them there, glowing in the dark, no more. Because that was the truth I'd finally come to understand: endings don't always explode. Sometimes they dissolve quietly, like frost on glass, slow, steady, irreversible. And as the heater groaned to life beside me, I felt the first warmth I'd felt in years, knowing I was done trying to buy my way into love. 2 days later, I sat in a diner off the interstate, the kind that smells like burnt toast and cheap syrup. My laptop was open, but I wasn't working. I just liked the illusion of control, the way the blue light made everything look cleaner than it really was. Outside, sleet hit the windows in soft rhythms. The world was gray and quiet. That's when the first notification popped up on my phone. Heating payment failed. I didn't react. I just watched the screen fade back to black, like it had delivered a secret meant only for me. 10 minutes later, another Buzz internet service suspended. Then, an hour after that, car insurance lapsed. Each alert landed like a heartbeat I didn't have to feel guilty for. I hadn't hacked anything. I hadn't sabotaged them. I'd simply stepped back and the system collapsed on its own. For years, I'd been the invisible scaffolding holding that house upright. Now the beams were gone, and the weight was showing. I imagined Mom pacing the kitchen, wrapping herself in that old robe she never washed properly. Her voice sharp, blaming Dad, blaming Kayla, blaming anyone but herself. I could see it all in my head, the flickering lamp, the silence between their arguments, the cold creeping up the stairs because the furnace had gone out again. For once, none of it was my responsibility. Around noon, Kayla texted, "The power's out. Mom's freaking. She keeps saying she doesn't understand what happened." I stared at the message thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked my phone and put it face down on the counter. It buzzed twice more before it went still. That night I was back in my motel room when the final message came. 9:47 p.m. Mom, please fix this. No hello, no apology. Just a command softened by desperation. I sat on the bed, the hum of the heater low and steady beside me. My phone screen glowed in the dark blue-white light, catching the edges of the room. I thought about every time she'd said those words before, "Fix this handle." It'd take care of it as if I were some kind of customer service line for her bad decisions. I looked at the clock again, 9:47. I remembered the smell of peppermint from the gifts still sitting in my trunk. Untouched the paper curling at the edges now. I should have been home by then, sitting in that same living room under flickering Christmas lights, pretending the hurt didn't matter. But instead, I was free. Cold, but free. I typed one word no, then I deleted it. She didn't deserve even that much. Instead, I turned off the phone, set it on the nightstand, and just sat there listening to the quiet hum of the motel heater. People think revenge is loud, dramatic, fiery something you brag about. But the best kind is silent, the kind that looks like peace to everyone else. The next morning, the motel lobby TV played a local weather report, another snowstorm sweeping through Missouri. I pictured the old house, the one I grew up in, dark, unheated, wrapped in white silence. I should have felt bad. Maybe a part of me did, but another part whispered, "This is what boundaries sound like." Later that day, I took a drive without a map. The snow turned to rain somewhere past the county line. I stopped at a rest area, watched the gray water ripple across the parking lot, and finally turned my phone back on. 32 missed calls, 12 voicemails. The first few were angry. The next ones sounded scared. By the end, Mom's voice was small. "Please, Molly, we don't know what to do." I didn't listen to the rest. I just hit delete. When I stepped back into my car, the air felt clearer somehow. I turned the key and the dashboard lights blinked awake, steady, reliable mine. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to fix anyone else's mess to feel like I belonged somewhere. I drove until the radio static faded, until there was nothing but the hum of the tires and the soft, sure voice in my head repeating what I'd been too afraid to say for years. You don't owe them peace if they keep building war. By mid-January, the silence started to change. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. Every day felt like the pause before a storm. Kayla called one night, her voice small, almost apologetic. "Something's off," she said. "Mom's been forgetting things. Dad keeps saying she's sick. They're fighting all the time." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent weeks ignoring their chaos, trying to relearn what quiet felt like. But a part of me still cared, and that part hated itself for it. "Just keep your distance," I told her. A few days later, my phone rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. It was Aunt Lee, calm, direct the way she'd always been. "Molly," she said, "we need to talk. There's something you should know." We met halfway in a diner that smelled like bleach and bacon grease. She came in holding a worn manila folder thick with papers. She didn't order coffee. She just slid the folder across the table. "I've been keeping these," she said, "for a long time." Inside were copies of my checks, transfers I'd made over the years to help with bills, but some of them had been cashed by someone else. Not Mom, not even in her handwriting. The signatures were all the same, awkward, slanted masculine. "Dad's. He's been moving money between accounts," Aunt Lee said, "using your mother's name, telling her you stopped helping years ago." The diner noise blurred. Forks, clinking doors, opening, laughter, it all dissolved into static. He told her I abandoned them. Aunt Lee nodded. She believed him. Everyone did. I didn't realize I was shaking until she reached across the table and steadied my hand. "I'm going over there," she said. "This weekend. You should know what's coming." Saturday arrived gray and brittle. Aunt Lee didn't warn anyone. She just showed up at the house. Kayla was already there dropping off groceries. Mom answered the door in her robe, her eyes dull and distant. And Dad, he looked surprised, then angry. The kind of anger that hides behind authority. According to Kayla, Aunt Lee walked in like she owned the place, set the folder on the kitchen table and said, "We're going to talk about the money." Dad tried to dismiss her. "This isn't your business." But Lee opened the folder anyway. Receipts, bank statements, copies of texts, all of it spilling across the table like spilled wine. She had proof of every dollar he'd taken, every lie he'd told. Kayla later told me that Mom just sat there silent, watching, and then slowly her face changed. Confusion first, then horror, then something that looked a lot like grief. "Robert," she said quietly, "what did you do?" He didn't answer. He just stood up, muttering, "You don't understand." He went into the kitchen, slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall tilted. For almost half an hour, no one spoke. Then Mom started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just a low, broken sound. She looked at Kayla, then at Aunt Lee. "Did Molly know?" she asked. Kayla said, "She knows now." When Aunt Lee called me that night, her voice was steady but tired. "It's done," she said. "He's gone. Your mother knows everything." I didn't speak. I just sat there on the edge of the bed watching snowflakes slide down the window pane. The motel room smelled like detergent and stillness. "Do they want me to come back?" I finally asked. Aunt Lee hesitated. "She wants to talk to you. Really talk." I imagined the scene, the old dining table, the papers still scattered, my mother sitting there in the quiet wreckage of her own denial. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the text. "Stay away from Christmas, you useless failure." The way she'd sent it without hesitation, the way it sliced me open. She hadn't written it because she was tricked. She'd written it because she'd believed it. And I couldn't unhear it. I took a deep breath. "Tell her I wish her well," I said. "But I'm not coming back." Aunt Lee sighed. "She's trying, Molly." "I know," I said softly. "But trying doesn't undo years of looking away." We said goodbye and I hung up. For a long time, I just sat there letting the quiet settle around me again. The kind that felt different now, earned, not imposed. Then my phone buzzed one last time. A text from Kayla. "He's gone. Mom's a mess. She keeps saying your name." I typed out a reply, "I'm sorry," then deleted it. Instead, I opened the motel window, let the cold air rush in and whispered to the night, "You built this, not me." Because that's what no one tells you about revenge. Sometimes the best ending isn't confrontation or forgiveness. It's the simple act of walking away and letting the truth do the damage for you. I lay back on the bed, watching the snow blur into the streetlights, and a small, tired smile crept across my face. She had no idea what was coming next, but now finally it had come. A week later, the calls stopped. No more numbers I didn't recognize, no more voicemails thick with guilt or rage. Just silence. It was strange how quickly chaos could burn itself out once it ran out of fuel. I'd rented a short-term apartment by then, nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom near downtown Austin with creaky floors and sunlight that spilled across the couch every morning. The quiet felt earned, not empty. For the first time, I didn't wake up to someone needing something from me. No lists, no invoices, no crises labeled urgent. Kayla texted a few times. Short messages at first, "She's in therapy." "Dad's still gone. It's weird without him." Then one night she sent a longer one. "Mom keeps talking about you. She's different. She writes things down now instead of shouting. She said you were right, that love shouldn't hurt like that." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I didn't know how to feel. Relief, maybe. Or exhaustion. A few days later, an email arrived from Mom. The subject line, "Talk." Inside one sentence. "I know I failed you, but I never stopped loving you." I read it twice. Once as a daughter, Once as the woman who finally stopped bleeding for everyone else. Then I hit delete, not out of anger, just acceptance. Because love, when it's weaponized, stops being love. Kayla didn't understand. She called that weekend. She's trying Molly. She's really trying. I know, I said. Then why can't you just forgive her? I looked out my window at the city lights, soft and distant, because forgiveness isn't the same as reunion. I can wish her peace without walking back into the fire. There was a long pause. You sound cold, Kayla said quietly. Maybe I said, or maybe I finally learned what warmth really feels like. When we hung up, I sat there a long time. The heater hummed low in the background, and for a strange second, I thought about Missouri, the smell of old pine cleaner, the hum of that broken vent in my childhood room, the sound of snow tapping the glass. None of it hurt anymore. It just existed. I started running again, picked up 2 new clients, filled my apartment with plants that didn't need much care, but still managed to grow. I learned how to cook something more than instant noodles, and when people asked about my family, I stopped making excuses. I just said, "We're distant." It was simple, honest, and true. One evening, as the sky bruised into orange and violet, I pulled the green Christmas sweater from the back of my closet, the one with the stitched lights. I'd kept it, though I hadn't meant to. I folded it neatly, laid it on the balcony railing, and let the wind take it. It drifted down slow, twisting once, before catching on the branches of the tree below. The tiny lights shimmered in the fading sun like they were still trying to glow. That was my last goodbye. People always imagine revenge as something grand cinematic, but mine ended quietly with no witnesses, no applause. Just peace, the kind that doesn't need to be proven. I poured myself a cup of tea, opened the window wider, and let the cool air wash over the room. Somewhere out there, I knew my family was learning how to live without me, and I was finally learning how to live without them. Sometimes silence really is the loudest revenge. It doesn't roar or announce itself. It just settles, soft, final, absolute. People like my parents think control comes from noise, the yelling, the guilt, the endless demands. But real control, I learned, is choosing not to answer. Choosing peace over permission. I don't hate them. Not anymore. Hate still ties you to the story, still makes you show up for the next chapter. I just stopped showing up. And when you stop showing up, the story ends on your terms. Now, when the holidays roll around, I don't drive north. I don't wrap gifts no one appreciates. I light a candle, make peppermint tea, and let the quiet fill every corner of my apartment. Sometimes I think about that text, "Stay away from Christmas," and realize it was the best gift she ever gave me. Because walking away wasn't cruelty. It was survival. If you've ever had to draw that line, if you've ever loved someone who only saw your worth when you were useful, then you know what I mean. You're not heartless for protecting your peace. You're just done being burned. And if you've been there, if this story hits a little too close, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I read them all. They remind me that stories like mine aren't rare. They're just rarely told out loud. Hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes the only way to rebuild a life is to finally stop fixing everyone else's.